All right, good morning. Thank you for joining us for the August meeting of the Indiana Commission to Combat Drug Abuse. I'd like to begin by welcoming everyone back to our first in-person meeting since February of 2020. We do have a couple new faces. Senator Bush couldn't join us today, but he has been appointed to fill Senator Merritt's spot, and thank you, Dr. Worsened, for joining us. I think this is your third full day as a state secretary. So welcome. Seeing we have quorum, we'll get right to business. The minutes were distributed in advance. Is there any questions, suggestions, changes? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion. Second? Perfect. All in favor? All right, minutes have been approved. Before I introduce our lineup of presenters today, I do have an announcement to make on our statewide naloxone distribution efforts. If you recall, back in May of 2020, we announced a $1 million partnership with Overdose Lifeline to fund and distribute 25,000 doses of naloxone. And the response was overwhelming. Between the Department of Health and Overdose Lifeline, we distributed 55,000 doses of naloxone last year. And we've carried that momentum into this year, funding the placement of 215 naloxbox units in all 92 counties, an initiative that continues to produce results. Already this year, Overdose Lifeline has distributed more than 19,000 doses of naloxone, and that's in addition to the 21,000 doses that Dr. Box and her team have distributed through our local health departments. Indiana reported a 33% increase in fatal overdoses in 2020, according to provisional data released by the CDC last month, and that's on par with the national average. And still this year, overdoses and naloxone administrations by EMS continue to rise. So the need for this life-saving medication is more present than ever, which is why today I'm excited to announce a $1.3 million partnership with Overdose Lifeline to distribute 35,000 more doses of naloxone statewide. With this funding, Overdose Lifeline also intends to purchase and place 215 more naloxboxes. In order to help Hoosiers enter into treatment, we must first keep them alive. Each dose represents another life that could be saved from this disease. So I want to thank our teams at the Division of Mental Health and Addiction and the Department of Health and Justin Phillips and Overdose Lifeline and all our partners at the local level for making this investment possible. We know that naloxone saves lives, and we'll do everything we can to get this medication into the hands of those who need it most. Now I'd like to introduce an individual whose own life was saved from the throes of addiction thanks to individuals who invested in his recovery. Doc Henry is an integral part of Phoenix Recovery Solutions Quick Response Team, responding to overdoses and mental health crises throughout Tippecanoe and the surrounding counties.
Good morning. My name is Doc Henry. I was invited here today to share with you my story. As a person living in long-term recovery, you get used to telling your story a lot. I've been telling my story for 5 years, 1 month, and 23 days, for which I've been clean from all drugs, alcohol, and any mood or mind-altering substances. Today, however, I'm not going to start my story with the things I put myself through and my family through. I'm not going to stand here today and tell you that my story started when I stuck a needle in my arm or took that first hit. You see, like anyone who finds recovery, their stories start with the find of motivation, the courage and desire to take the first step towards a better life for themselves. And my first step was taken after hearing some of the most powerful words any father can hear. I was 2 weeks into an inpatient treatment program when my case manager from George Junior Republic, who was my advocate during a DCS case with my 2 children who had been removed from a home and placed in foster care. She had brought my son and daughter to this treatment center for a visit with me. As the visit with my children was nearing its end, my little boy looked at me with tears welling in his eyes and said, "Dad, I'm done being bad. Can I come back home?" My 6-year-old son blamed himself for why he and his little sister had been removed from my home and put into foster care. That was the day that I heard God, my higher power. In my life, in the voice of a little boy with the entire world in front of him, and his only concern was that he would behave good enough that he could come back home with his dad. After my son and daughter left their visit with me, I fell to my knees. For the first time in my life, I cried for someone other than myself. And for the first time in my life, as a man and as a father, I began to envision the man and father that I hoped to someday become. The man and father that my children deserved. And then my journey in recovery began there. Many of my peers who have come before you may have begun their stories with their addictions, drug of choice, or legal trouble. We know this story. And while it is my story, it is also the story out of every 4 Hoosiers 12 and up in our state. But something about the work I've been doing and opportunities that have been presented by the work and dedication of this body before me, it has made me realize that I'm not just the sum of my mistakes. I am currently employed at Phoenix Paramedic Solutions in Lafayette, Indiana. I am a certified addiction peer recovery coach 1, a certified recovery specialist, and a certified healthcare worker, and I work on the quick response team with Phoenix. I've been working in the Lafayette community since 2016. Prior to coming onto the Phoenix team, I was a men's program case manager for a recovery residence, the same recovery residence I sought refuge at when a part of my story in recovery began. I am not the neglectful parent who chose drugs and criminal behavior over their children. I am not just a person in recovery. I am someone who is improving his community, working to be the best father and husband I can possibly be every day. A beacon of hope, if you will, for those lost and alone. I am recovery. My recovery is constantly enriched by what I have learned. I have made peace with myself. What all that I have gained and lost and learned and become. I find gratitude for every event that has brought me to this moment. I stand here with the deepest gratitude. I can look back and see that my own path to this very moment has been neither short nor straight. While on this journey in recovery and the work I do to give back to our communities, I stand here before you and reflect on my why. Why I am here today, why I continue on this journey for myself, and why I fight every day to give back and advocate for others who are on their own journey. My why is to be the voice to the voiceless. We all have to find our why. For many of us and many of you in this room, we have similarities despite our roads here. We all want to do more. We all want to be a better and care a little more. For me, it means making someone else's world a little bigger, filled with a little more opportunity, and surrounded by a lot more hope. That's all I have.
Thank you, Doc, and thank you for making the trek down from Monticello. For many of you, this won't be the last time that we'll see Doc. He is going to be featured in the next phase of FSSA's Know the Facts campaign. So we'll be seeing a lot more of you through that campaign. Moving on, in May, we invited the Attorney General's office to provide an update on an in-depth look of the $26 billion multi-state opioid settlement with the major opioid distributors and manufacturers. I think we had a good discussion, and I know there were lots of questions. And with the recent announcement last week, wanted to invite back co-chief counsels Betsy Denardi and Corey Voigt of the office's complex litigation division to give us an update on Indiana's portion of the settlement and also what's at risk if local governments continue to choose to opt out of the state's agreement. So.
Okay, thank you. Members of the commission, thank you for having us today. We talked to you last time in May, and at that time we indicated there was a potential settlement that could happen, and it has happened now. I want to remind the commission that the Office of the Attorney General has filed several lawsuits against manufacturers and distributors, and the office has also participated in the prosecution of cases against Johnson & Johnson by serving on the executive committee in the multi-state litigation. So here's our update on the settlement that occurred. The settlement was with the three big distributors, McKesson, AmerisourceBergen, and Cardinal Health, and then also with Johnson & Johnson. The settlement was announced July 21st, 2021 by a bipartisan group of state attorneys general. The states have 30 days to decide to join the settlement, 30 days to sign on. Indiana intends to join the settlement. State and local governments in Indiana can receive up to $507 million from these settlements over several years. Importantly, very importantly, this amount could be reduced by up to $237.9 million if we do not have our litigating cities and counties join the settlement. It's imperative that cities and counties that are litigating claims against opioid manufacturers and distributors join our settlement in order to receive the full amount of money available under the terms of these settlements. Assuming the settlement moves forward, funds will start arriving in April 2022, and payments will be made on a yearly basis. Payments under the Johnson & Johnson deal will be made over the course of 9 years. Payments under the distributors deal will be made over the course of 18 years. Pursuant to legislation that was passed on a bipartisan basis by the General Assembly in the last session, money will be divided into amounts for state funds, 15%, subdivision funds, 15%, and then what we term as the abatement bucket, which represents 70% of the settlement funds. They must be directed for use of opioid treatment, prevention, and education. These funds can also be used for co-occurring disorders. Subdivisions cannot join the settlement unless the state decides to join. Indiana's decided to join, but these deals do not get done unless the states come into the fold. And this is because the defendants want to know that there is certainty going forward that litigation against them will be resolved. And the key for them is bringing the states in, which in turn leads to bringing the subdivisions in, which in turn leads to a resolution of the lawsuits against the defendants. That's how settlement occurs in this scenario. Finally, the last thing I'm going to say, and then I'm going to turn it over to my co-director, Ms. Denardi. There are national attorney fee funds that will pay some or all of attorney fees. And so what do I mean by this? There are outside counsel that represent the cities and the counties. And outside counsel has contracts with the cities and the counties. And we believe these contracts are likely contingency fee contracts. So when settlement money comes in, the council must pay, the city or the county must pay their council a portion of what they recover. As a part of the settlement that was negotiated by a bipartisan group of the state attorneys general, there was the creation of a fund in the settlement. So money would not have to be diverted in the manner I just talked about. Those fees could come out of that national fund. There's a sub-fund called a common benefit fund that will provide additional money to council, these outside counsel, if they did work that benefited all subdivisions across the nation. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my co-director.
So I'm going to talk about why there's the possibility that we will lose almost $238 million. So the way that the settlements are structured is that there is a base payment that all of the states that sign on will receive. And the base payment for the distributor settlement is 55% of it, and then for the Johnson & Johnson is 45%. And then the remainder of the payments are based on an incentive structure. So as Corey said, what they would like to do is get as many of the people who are litigating against them to resolve their claims so they have less litigation moving forward. And so in order to do that, they want to incentivize as many people as possible to join the settlement. And so what they have done is created incentive payments that can be received by the state, but only if we get litigating and non-litigating subdivisions to join the settlement. Now, the statute that Corey mentioned that was passed by the General Assembly has all subdivisions that were not litigating at the time that the statute was passed will be part of the state settlement and part of our state plan that we have put together. But all of those subdivisions that were litigating at the time had the ability to opt out of the state plan, and all of them did so. Under the statute, they have the ability to opt back into the state plan, and they have 60 days from the date that they opted out to opt back in. And those 60 days are running now. As you may have seen, Muncie already had their city council meeting, and they decided not to opt back in. So they will not be part of the state settlement as it sits right now. And so that amount of the population will not be included in Indiana's amounts that we will receive. So I'm not going to go through all of the incentives for you because it's complicated, but to provide an example, in the distributors agreement, one of the incentives is called incentive C. And if we were able to obtain incentive C, we would get above what our current base amount, $62 million more, to try and get up to the $507 million. But we can only do that if all litigating and non-litigating subdivisions within the state who have a population of more than 30,000 join our settlement. The way to get all of the money without worrying about incentives A, B, or incentives B and C is to get everyone to join. That's incentive A. So currently we won't receive this money if all of the litigating subdivisions do not opt back into our plan. And the time, as I said, the time for them to do so is running out. So to explain that incentive C, I provided a chart for you, which is a little complicated, or at least a little small for you to see if you don't have it in front of you. But it essentially requires that until we reach 60% of all of the subdivisions in the state of Indiana that have a population of 30,000 or more, we don't get incentive C. Once we reach 60%, which we currently need 121,000 more people in our population, in our subdivisions to get to 60%, then we get 25% of the incentive C amount, which is listed there. And then the amount goes up as we get more and more of the population to become part of the settlement and join the state plan. Because these numbers won't make a lot of sense, but we're double counting people. So if they are in a county that's litigating, but are also in a city that's litigating, they get counted twice. So those numbers, if you try and add them up, it's gonna add up to more than the population of the state. So that's just to give you some example of how much money we are talking about if the litigating subdivisions do not rejoin the state plan and opt back in. We also have included for you a list of all of the litigating subdivisions and the dates that they have to opt back in so that you have that information as well. Just so that you as commission members are aware of what the populations are and what the cities and counties are that are currently not part of the state plan. That's all the information that we have for you based on the current two settlements, Distributors and Johnson & Johnson, but we're happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Are there questions from the commissioners?
What's the incentive for opting out or opting back in?
So the incentive to opting back in is being part of the state plan and having the money now. The money will come starting in April, as Corey mentioned. What's not also in our PowerPoint is if we can get 100% essentially of the state to join, Johnson & Johnson will front load almost all of their payments. So we'll get years 1 through 4 payments in year 1. We will get all of that money at one time to go out and utilize it now rather than waiting and getting the money year after year where time will go by and the cost or value of the money might change. I'm going to put myself in the shoes of the subdivisions that may want to stay out. They may think that they will get more money if they stay out of our case or out of our plan. If they go forward with their own litigation, they may think that by litigating and going through, they will get more money, but the risk of litigation is something that is unsure. You don't know if you will get more money or not, but that might be why they would like to do that.
I'll add on to that. You know, in my former life, I represented on the defense side in several cases. And any mediator, if you mediate a case, any mediator worth their salt start the mediation off by telling the parties, this is the day that you can control what happens to your case. And you can resolve it today. And if we proceed with litigation, if the state proceeds with its litigation, or if the cities and counties proceed with their litigation, they don't get to control necessarily the outcome. They lose that opportunity. And so the money's here. It's ready to be distributed, and it's an opportunity for the subdivision to control their cases.
Yeah, hi, Cindy Zimke, State Rep. I've got 3 counties on this list out of the 5 counties that I serve, and I have contacted all of them. And is there any way, is it appropriate for you all to reach out to them, or what, if they have counsel, I don't know what the limitations are. I have encouraged them to contact the Attorney General's office, and I told them, I said, if you sign on to the state, it's a done deal, you'll get it. But I don't even know if it's appropriate for me to advise them as their state representative.
So the rules of professional conduct prevent the Attorney General's office from reaching out to any person that we know is represented by counsel. So we cannot reach out to the county and, talk to them, like to the county council or the county commissioners. We can't reach out and talk to them because they have counsel. The county itself, the county councilor, the county commissioners can reach out to our office, but they have to include their attorney on any communications that they send.
Well, it's been frustrating for me because I've been advocating for drug treatment as long as I've been serving for 9 years. And, you know, normally I have credibility with my, you know, my 5 counties. And, but again, this is the whole thing where they have signed on with attorneys, and it's very frustrating for me. But I could only advise them.
Betsy, if I could add a little bit here, my name's Larry Hopkins from the Attorney General's office. The issue of whether you can talk to them, I think that's clear, that you as a legislator can talk to them. And, you know, the lack of information has been the most frustrating aspect of this whole thing. The subdivisions, for the most part, signed on with their outside counsel years ago. And they've largely forgotten about, you know, what was involved in all this until just recently. And we've had an opportunity to negotiate, I guess, with a consortium of plaintiffs' counsels representing all these subdivisions. And 2 key things really have evolved from those discussions. Number one, they're concerned about these attorney fee contracts that they have, the contingency fee contracts. Most of those are up to 33%. As Betsy and Corey detailed, the settlement will only allow 15% or 30% of the funds to be used in an unrestricted manner, that they could be used to pay attorney fees. Of that amount, 15% in Indiana will come to the state and 15% to the subdivisions. So the subdivisions have roughly 15% to pay a 33% contingency fee contract. You know, you can second guess, you know, until the day is done, whether or not they should have entered into that contract, but that's kind of where we're at. So a lot of the negotiations involved around this idea that the state can create what's called a backstop fund to pay the attorney fees. And in our consultation with the governor's office, with the legislative staff, we all agreed that was not a feasible thing for the state to do, to create this backstop fund to pay attorney fees. As Corey and Betsy alluded to, the national settlement has a fund to pay attorney fees, but it doesn't cover up to 33%. If they submit to that fund, they're going to have to take a haircut in terms of what their fees are, which I think you can make a case that's appropriate for everybody to give a little bit to make this all work. The other major sticking point in the negotiations was the fact that even though I think the intent of everyone involved in creating the state legislation, legislators, the governor's office, our staff, we wanted to partner with subdivisions so that they would control 50% of the funding. So on the unrestricted funds, the 30%, that's being split 15% to the subdivisions, 15% to the state. On the 70% that goes towards abatement, that the intent of that was also to let the subdivisions direct 50% of that 70%. The legislation alludes to that, but it doesn't have that direct plain language in there. We've been trying to communicate as much as possible to all the subdivisions that they will have that ability to provide direction on how they want their 50% spent. But the plaintiffs' councils have worked overtime to create the impression that if they opt back in, they will only control 15% of the funds. So it's been difficult to counter that argument from our office because we can't talk to them. But I think we're at the point where this is an all hands on deck situation. The Attorney General sent a letter to the governor asking for his direct involvement. We've implored several legislators to directly contact the subdivisions. I think everybody on this commission, everybody in the audience needs to reach out if you have a contact in one of these subdivisions and get them to pop back in. I mean, there's a lot at stake here. And I think what's holding them back really is just misinformation about what this all involves at the state level. And hopefully, if we make a great effort here in the next couple of weeks to let them know that they will be partners, we can get them back in. But right now, there's just a dearth of information about how, especially the abatement funds, will be distributed at the local level through regions, and anything that any of us can do to talk to the subdivisions will be extremely helpful.
Other questions? Do we know whether the trade association such as AIM or the AIC has been engaged or taken a position on this?
Well, after the legislation was passed, we sat down with both organizations and drew up a plan to provide an FAQ, frequently asked questions, for the subdivisions as to what all the details of the legislation were, what would be involved in the settlement, how they could participate. When word got out that we were going to work through them to communicate, one of the lawyers for the plaintiffs consortium sent a cease and desist letter to them, telling them they could not work with our office to communicate the details of the settlement. So that has really chilled their relationship with communicating with the litigating subdivisions and also working with our office. We have done some things with them in terms of providing information through their national organizations. They've also had detailed briefing on settlement details. We do have, we're hoping to schedule or participate in a scheduled phone call with some of the litigating counties this Friday, tomorrow. But right now, it's been difficult for those organizations to be able to work with us to get information out about it.
As recently as last week, we, Jay Chaudhry and I at DMHA were working with IAC to try to have these conversations, and ultimately, and counties approached us wanting to have the meeting and asking if we could run to talk to all of their members. Ultimately, as we got closer this week to actually having that meeting, they came back and said that only the non-litigating counties could participate, and we don't think that that would be a good use of time. So Dave Bodorf and the Association of Counties has been as helpful as he can, understanding he's got challenges as well. Any other questions? I do think it's important to, I guess I have one. How does this all then relate to the Purdue Pharma bankruptcy that is hoping to be settled at some point soon?
So Purdue Pharma is set for so they submitted their Chapter 11 plan for how they want to emerge from bankruptcy. All of the creditors were able to vote on whether or not they were going to approve the plan. Indiana, the state, submitted their vote saying that we would approve the plan. The confirmation hearing for whether or not the bankruptcy judge will confirm the plan is set to start on Monday and last for several days. And then if the judge confirms the plan, then it will move forward from there. If Indiana does not have all of these subdivisions opting back into the state plan, we will have to follow the default plan that the Chapter 11 plan contemplates. And so a lot of the word plan, but the default is set up in a way that all of the money for the state will come to the agency that is responsible for mental health and addiction work, so FSA, DMHA. And that agency is required to create regions within the state, and those regions will then have the money sent to them, which is very similar to how the statute is currently set up. All of the money that we receive from Purdue Pharma, though, has to be used for those education, prevention, and treatment programs. All of the funds are restricted. So any money we get from that will have to go back into the communities to assist in trying to abate the crisis, as opposed to the unrestricted amounts that will go elsewhere.
And just follow up on that, how they interrelate, they don't. The issue in the J&J and the distributor settlement is not an issue in the Purdue bankruptcy. It's because the district court, the bankruptcy court, will direct distribution of all funds that Indiana is to receive, via the plan that Betsy just mentioned. There's no base bonus.
And the bankruptcy court has the ability to, they will set up a fund as well for attorney's fees, but the bankruptcy court, as a different type of court, because it's a bankruptcy court, has the ability to basically say, whatever was in your contract, you're not entitled to, you just get this amount, because this is what's happening through bankruptcy. So that attorney fee fund issue should not also be an issue like it currently seems to be with the Johnson & Johnson and distributor settlement.
Thanks. I think that's also an important point that, plaintiff's attorneys ask for money to be diverted from funds that would go toward treatment and recovery services to go to line the pockets of plaintiff's attorneys. So I think that's something that's very telling in their request as well, that you said earlier. Thank you. I'm sure this won't be the last time that we have you come present. So thank you for the information, and I know everyone at the table is committed to ensuring that we get the word out there and move the ball forward.
Thank you all.
Next, I want to introduce Cyrilla Blackman, who's the Deputy Director of the Division of Mental Health and Addiction. Cyrilla is accompanied by some members of her team, who she'll introduce in a moment. This is a team of 5, and their 10 regional prevention coordinators across the state have been instrumental in developing the education of prevention strategies. And oftentimes we spend a lot of time talking about treatment and the recovery side of addiction, and we often overlook how we can prevent people from ever developing a substance use disorder in the first place. So we've asked Cyrilla to come present on her efforts, and thank you for being here.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, committee members. I am so excited. 6 years ago, when I first became deputy over prevention, we were Office of 1. So I'm so excited now. We have a full team, and we are able to expand our reach for prevention and early intervention, and really have the bandwidth to make that impact throughout. I could not have done any of this without my team. So they will be here to present. I asked Steve Delman. She's our new Assistant Deputy Director. And she will take it from here. Thank you, Julie.
Good morning. Again, thank you for letting us speak with you today. We're going to go. So the DMHA prevention mission is to reduce substance misuse and promote behavioral health across the lifespan of Indiana citizens by maintaining a coordinated, effective, and accountable system of prevention and behavioral health promotion services. And we do that to ensure our vision of sustainable environments that nurture, assist, and empower all Indiana citizens to access and experience optimum physical, mental, and emotional health. We are funded through SAMHSA's Substance Abuse Prevention and Treatment Block Grant, specifically the 20% set aside for primary prevention. And we have a short 4-minute video that really outlines what primary prevention is and what the goals of primary prevention is, and how it differs from secondary and tertiary prevention.
Yeah, independent living, right, right. So those living conditions, can pose a risk, for this population to use. Bereavement is another one. This group, experiences bereavement probably unlike any other. Depression is usually extremely high. They see people, of course, that are dying around them, and sometimes the mindset is, I'm next, or when will it be my turn? So these are the kinds of impactful things that are happening with this group. So we did come up with some initiatives to help. We have some communities that are implementing these strategies, and these are all evidence-based initiatives. One is WRAP, which is a Wellness Recovery Action Plan, where individuals kind of take responsibility and they are empowered to make decisions about their mental health as well as their drug use. Healthy Ideas is identifying depression and empowering activities for seniors. Another program is ROC, which is Raising Our Children's Kids. We have, of course, a lot of grandparents who become primary caregivers for their grandkids. A lot of times their own children are either involved with the legal system or are involved with substance use, meaning that the grandparents have to step up. Tremendous amount of stress and things associated with that. So that particular program is awesome. And the last one is called WISE, which is the Wellness Initiative for Senior Education. Again, I wanted to share with you one of the newsletters that went out about WISE, just to give you a little more information about it. Kind of making the decision to focus on seniors, kind of prior to the pandemic was difficult. That was the first group that was kind of self-isolated, who were cut off. People couldn't visit. So, you know, if grandma can't see her grandkids, they weren't real receptive to DMHA folks coming in and offering some programs. But we have some awesome agencies in the field with prevention who were able to come up with some tremendous workarounds and some tremendous things to still be able to reach that population, because it was a very, very critical time for those people. So I wanted to share with you a newsletter which one of our agencies put together. We did try things with Zoom with that population. Technology and seniors aren't always congruent, but a lot of learning took place. But we also did some more traditional things, going back to snail mail, going back to making those one-on-one phone calls and things like that to help with the isolation. These were our partners, or are our partners, with helping with the 50 plus. As Jeannie mentioned, we do have Prevention Insights providing technical assistance, as well as Thompson P. Miller, who is evaluating evaluation services. Again, this is kind of new for DMHA to focus specifically on this population. So we're very interested in what the data will show us and that kind of thing. But I'm going to start around a newsletter. This went out to all of the 50 plus residents in Madison County with one of our partners at Minority Health. So if you want to just the next population that I wanted to talk about is Indiana NOFAS. This particular group has been around for a while. Indiana is an affiliate of the National Organization of Fetal Alcohol Syndrome. And one thing that I will mention is that even though the main focus is alcohol, we know that people who drink alcohol while pregnant will also consume other substances as well. So we see, of course, the increase in neonatal abstinence syndrome, NAS, being impacted by this as well. So I guess the main thing that I want to mention about the initiatives going around FASD is that it is a preventable condition, and that there is a lot of activity going on with our partner agency in terms of education, in terms of exposure, working with physicians, working with parents who are affected, who have children who are impacted by FASD. So I think one of the most troubling things about FASD is that it cannot be repaired. A young child who was born alcohol exposed, and there are, of course, developmentally some things going on with the brain, it cannot be repaired. And so, you know, with some of the other things that we work with, people can get treatment, there is recovery, there is hope. Unfortunately, the things that happen with a newborn with FASD cannot be repaired, and is kind of a lifelong, often invisible disability with the brain. So we've got a lot of work to do with getting the word out about pregnant moms kind of refusing that. The last this is our team, of course, from MHAI, the NOFAS team, and again, we have Thompson P. Miller working with evaluation for some of the initiatives and things that are going on with that. And the last group that I wanted to mention was historically underserved and vulnerable populations. This is probably the newest group, if you will, that we're looking to address. From the National Council on Mental Health Wellbeing, they talk a little bit about COVID, and I won't read to you, but basically mental health and substance use crisis within the population impacted adversely Black, Hispanic, Asian, Native American, and LGBTQ+ communities. And so, as we know, a lot of things kind of came to light with COVID, especially around mental health. So we're looking at how do we engage grassroots organizations to provide prevention programming to some of those who have been most impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. So we will be looking to see how we can fund dollars, again, to Black, Indigenous, and people of color, as well as the LGBTQ population who has been impacted by those initiatives. So I think that's all that I have to cover. Are there any questions about any of these? Okay, thank you. And we will now have Kathy.
Hi guys. I'm going to switch to a different population, which is vastly different than those that we're talking about on preventing substance use. And right now I'm going to discuss the FINAR amendment, which is a federal amendment that was put in place to work with tobacco retailers and their sale of tobacco products to underage youth. So back in 1992 is when this amendment was put in place by an Oklahoma congressman named Mike Sinai. Hence the name FINAR Amendment. It did restrict the sale of tobacco products to those under the age of 18. And then, of course, when we have an amendment, there needs to be some teeth behind it in order to keep it current and actually have states enforce this. So in January of 1996, SAMHSA actually created a tie to our block grant dollars, where it requires states to submit a report annually. The FINAR amendment, or the FINAR report, is due December 31st of every calendar year, and I'm in charge of putting that together. Part of the FINAR is to do a sample of retailers across the state. So they provided us with a program. We enter in all of our tobacco retailers, and it spits out a statistically significant sample of retailers that we then work with our state excise officers and use across the state in order to go in and do underage purchase inspections. Also tied to that is that we come out with a retailer violation rate, which is an RVR, which you'll see on the next slide. I'll show you in a moment. Comes out with that number that we report on every year. This retailer violation rate is required by SAMHSA to stay at 20% or under, or we are hit with a penalty. Prior to December of 2019, we could have lost up to 40% of our block grant dollars, which is a considerable amount. Back in December of 2019, as many of you are aware, the Tobacco 21 legislation went through, where the purchase age was increased to 21. As part of that, they did lessen the penalty, and now we stand to lose only 10% of those block grant dollars, which when you're talking about multi-millions of dollars, is still quite a bit of money. This slide here will actually show historically where our retailer violation rates have been since the 90s. We started quite high. Obviously, the first sample was over 40% of our retailers were violating. And then it's gone down and kind of gone back up again. That dotted line is what's really important. Those are the average number of inspections completed in the state per month during those given years. And back when our Alcohol Tobacco Commission was funded a little bit higher and we had a lot more money to do inspections, they were doing about $900 to $1,000 inspections per month. That's a lot, and that's outside of what our FDA is contracted to do on a federal level within the state. And then those fundings kind of trailed off, and that program went a little stagnant. So numbers per month dropped when it came to inspections, and because of that, our rate went up a little. Right now, it's been steady. It's a 15%. I know this only shows up to 2019. We were able to complete inspections last year. Normally, they're done in the summer for SINAR. We weren't able to start until September last year, so we were happy to get through all of our sample stores. We ended at around 15%. This year's inspections started in the spring. They just wrapped up. I am waiting on numbers, but we are looking at possibly being right around that 14, 15% again. Due to this, I have created or worked with IU Bloomington, who helps do the statistics through Prevention Insights. And we have created a retailer training piece, which will be a consistent training tool for retailers in the state to utilize when it comes to carding. So we found that some of the larger convenience stores and places that sell tobacco might have a training piece included in their onboarding, but then you have a lot of these local shops, the vapor shops, the tobacco stores that may not be a national conglomerate that has that money to create a standardized training. So we've done that for them, and we're hopeful that we'll have a lot of clerks utilizing this. It also is very specific to Indiana ID and Indiana laws, whereas most of the national trainings for companies go across state lines and aren't very specific when it comes to what Indiana requires of them. And then also the other side of my job, so the alcohol program portion of my title, I actually work with colleges and universities. So we're in cohort 2. The second group of schools is Ball State University, Ivy Tech Community College of Kokomo, and Indiana University of Bloomington. They've completed year 1 of their grant cycle, which was a lot of capacity building, working through that strategic prevention framework. A lot of them have developed coalitions on campus to address this. Substance use, mostly alcohol, but marijuana and tobacco have also come up to the forefront. Previous universities that were funded was University of Notre Dame, Purdue University, and IUPUI. Those just ended last June and are doing well. I'm happy to say that they have been able to implement programming that are very sustainable for them. Some have used substance use prevention education into their first year courses. Some have been able to change some policies and how they treat those who have either been caught with substances or gone through a disciplinary hearing because of that. Also providing them education and general knowledge of what is, acceptable alcohol use and what is not. So through the colleges, we do TA through MHAI. MHAI also houses the Indiana Coalition to Reduce Underage Drinking, and part of that is also the Indiana Collegiate Action Network. So we found that colleges need the extra support. So the Collegiate Action Network actually issues mini grants to do prevention work on a smaller scale for the universities across the state. They also meet regularly to talk about different topics that are around substance use and mental health that are an issue on their campus and how to brainstorm ideas between each other. And then the Coalition to Reduce Underage Drinking covers all of those who are under the age of 21. So our partner works with local communities as well as the universities, schools, local schools, a number of the LTCs across the state, and any technical assistance they need when it comes to addressing underage drinking. And mine was short and sweet, so that's it for me, and I'm going to turn it over to Melissa.
Okay, I'm Melissa, so nice to be here. So as Jamie mentioned earlier, DMHA is given 20% of federal block grant funding towards primary prevention. So I currently oversee 15 community prevention organizations that do provide primary prevention to over 15 counties. And these counties do follow the 6 Center for Substance Abuse Prevention strategy. So basically, after they've assessed their communities, determined their target population and their needs, then they determine what strategies will address that target population's needs. For my organizations, they do tend to focus more towards youth and families and before and after school programs. And we do currently have that they have to have at least 70% of their programs that are evidence-based. And the 30% can be either evidence-based, more programming that is evidence-based, or best practice. We will also be funding 25 additional organizations that'll be through the COVID stimulus funding. Okay. And that, you'll see that list right there is who we currently fund. And to make a note, we do look at, of course, from cradle to grave, so of course, there's 50 plus and my youth. And then we have the Prevention Leadership Group. So currently, we do have state partners that are within that group. So we have Indiana Department of Health, Department of Education, Department of Child Services, HIDA, ICJI. Hey, Mike. And we all pretty much get together and we talk about our prevention efforts. So we want to have a definition of prevention and evidence-based practices across prevention agencies. We want to be able to identify gaps in prevention resources and services so that we prevent any duplication of prevention efforts. And this is, of course, all done by sharing data and prevention programs. And we just want to make sure, like we mentioned before, we remain data-driven and ensure an increased capacity and use this to pretty much have our data guide our decision-making. Okay, so this is the meat of prevention. So everybody, buckle your seats. It's going to be a quick but bumpy ride. Okay. So we have 92 counties, and we have split it up into 10 regions. Okay, so the idea of this regional prevention system that I'm going to tell you about is to hear from the communities so that they can tell us what they need, and not us go in and tell them what we think they need. So the goal that we had was to hire a regional prevention coordinator, 10, one from each region that actually live in that region, know the people, and they go in and they communicate with the influencers, who are our stakeholders, prime movers, and champions. Basically, they're individuals who live within those regions, and we create what we call the client consultation boards. Now, these client consultation boards are just something that the regional prevention coordinator will hold a space for them to meet at so that they can discuss what their needs are within that county, whatever those needs are on a systemic level. So they don't focus on programs, they focus on systems, the needs. And then those CCBs, or those individuals who are in the CCBs, will choose someone or someone to represent their region and join what we call a regional council. That regional council will then come to what we hold every year, which is the Winter Congress. That Winter Congress is where we can hear from the people that were chosen from the CCBs at that regional council to basically say, here, hey, this is what our region is saying the needs are as far as prevention, what the barriers are, all of that. If you notice where it says CCB, you see numbers next to it, it's because it can be more than one CCB in a region. So what's important to know is that all this information that we get from the regional councils and even from the CCBs, we all feed back into the Prevention Leadership Group as well and share it with our state partners. And then we also take that information and we shape programs or policies just to make sure it's what we're doing, our efforts are being effective and impactful. Did I blow your mind with that? Did you guys have any questions on that?
We talk a lot about evidence-based analysis and data-driven decision-making. Do we as a state or within your group at FSSA do we have those skill sets and the technology in-house, or do we rely upon public policy and health experts outside of state government?
Well, Dr. Mangrum actually holds a evidence-based work group where she basically talks to a group of individuals, I think there's also state partners, and they discuss how to determine if something is evidence-based, if there should be newer programs that should be considered evidence-based. Does you want to talk more about that? She's a guru on it.
Yeah, we do have an evidence-based work group within DMHA, and we do look at policies, practices, strategies that our communities are implementing out in the field, and we do determine whether or not they meet the criteria of being evidence-based. We do encourage our communities to, with the funding that they receive, to use the bulk or the majority of their dollars on evidence-based initiatives that have been shown to be effective with the populations that they're serving, as well as with the protective and risk factors that they want to address. So yeah, we do quite a bit with evidence-based initiatives. Our work group is made up of some of our community partners from around the state, as well as several state agencies. Any other questions?
This is very exciting work. Thank you for presenting this today. Just while we're here, I do want to put a pin and we can follow up afterwards, but I think that once folks are, let me back up, Kristen Doss with Indiana Department of Correction, but once folks are with us at the Department of Correction, we learn a lot of lessons, right, about those things that brought them to us and how we can help them once they leave. So as part of that prevention leaders group, I would like to see some involvement from DOC in that task force or in that group, so that we can all kind of do the same work together.
Absolutely.
Any other questions?
Okay. So without further ado, Joetta Collins is one of our regional prevention coordinators. She's been with us the longest out of all of our 10 coordinators. The first one. So she will talk to you a little bit more about her job. Thank you.
Apparently it has a minor wellness. And I wore a long one, so, go figure. But thank you for having me. Thank you. So, yes, I am what they call the veteran of the group, or the regional prevention coordinators. I've been partnering and been working with DMHA and our wonderful boss, Mr. Rosman, since September of 2019. So I have had the pleasure of learning the regional prevention system as we went along and as it evolved. And I am from Region 1, which is Lake County, Porter County, and LaPorte. I am from Lake County, so part of that is when Melissa mentioned having a regional coordinator be from the region that knows the area, that knows the community. So I'm from Gary. I live in Porter County, and I did get that question a lot when I went out into the field and began to introduce myself as this role. People often said, where are you from? Where you live, because there's a lot of apprehensive about, sharing your heart or pouring out your heart to someone that's not from the area. It's like, well, how can you come into our community and tell us what we need? You don't even know us or know that you're from the community. So that is a very valuable part of the role. So the regional prevention system is, like Melissa said, it did seem like a bumpy ride, but it has been proven so far to be very valuable in connecting with influencers and community partners in the region. And so part of my role is being that link and that bridge. And I don't like to say from the bottom up, but from the community up to the state level, which is DMHA, and shaping policies and strategic planning on what the community needs,
what the services are, programs that are needed, the gaps, and any challenges and trends that we're seeing in the community. And so I will say that it has been impactful because influencers and community partners, what we call them, have been telling me and other regional coordinators that they are happy to know that someone is listening, that they have a voice to share. And so part of the role, of course, is introducing myself, the regional system, meeting with influencers, and as you mentioned, that not just everyday professionals, but we are meeting with everyone in the community, volunteers, librarians, school, education, police officers, family members, anyone who has a stake in the community, whether they work in the community or they live in the community, to listen to these challenges and these trends that are happening, so that when resources are able to come down into the community, they are shaped by the language of the community. And so the client consultation boards, if you will, are board meetings, meetings of the minds is what I call them. The influencers getting together in one room, and lately I've been calling it the Zoom room because we do a lot of Zooming, But I would say that, so the members are part of that client, and we call it a client because we are here to service the community. And so we are not here to, as regional prevention coordinators, to say what you need or what the community needs. It's their voice that they're sharing, what they're seeing and what they are experiencing. And the consultation part is to consult, to get together in a room like this, to consult and to share, to say, this is what we're seeing in the schools, this is what we're seeing at the Boys and Girls Club, this is what we're seeing at the Swanson Center or the Mental Health Center, if you will. And so that is a client consultation board. And so, and those numbers that Melissa talked about, each region is broken down into the counties. And so for my particular region is, of course, Lake County, LaPorte, and Porter County, which is three of the larger counties in the state. And so I have 3 client consultation boards for those counties, in addition to 4 unique cities that were pulled out based on some data that the Northwest Indiana Development Definition Committee in Northwest Indiana decided that Michigan City, Hammond, East Chicago, and Gary are 4 unique cities in the region, in Region 1, Northwest Indiana, that have a particular and unique challenges, demographic challenges, and economic needs. And so those also make up the 4 remaining of my 7 regions and my 7 client consultation boards. And so I'll just end with, I was asked, what would the state commission like to know, or what they should know? Is that the mission and the goal is healthier Hoosiers. And so the way that we're going to be able to reach and have every Hoosier have access to equitable health is to be able to listen to every Hoosier's voice. And that is by inviting them to be a part and participate in the regional prevention system. And so I'll say that my 2.5 years that I've been with DMHA and part of the regional system, it has been a pleasure. I really enjoy the work that I do. And it's really awesome to hear what's happening in the communities and updating the state, if you will, on some of the issues or concerns or challenges that otherwise may have gone unheard.
Well, thank
Did I
you.
miss anything?
Yeah, thank you.
Doug, I do have one question.
Yeah.
I'm gonna put you on the spot a little bit.
Go ahead.
I figured that's what you would say. If you had to name the top 3 issues within your region, within the Lake, Porter, and LaPorte counties, what would the top 3 issues be?
Top 3 issues. Yeah, you did put me on the spot. Well, we've talked about that. I've held my client consultation boards, and we've talked about the top needs in the region. And one of the concerns that came up was updating the evidence-based programs that meet the current needs of what's happening in the community with the youth. Definitely, COVID-19 has
shed a light on mental health in the community. And part of the DMHA team talks about that. We're seeing a lot of increase in the mental health concerns for in the youth as well. And a lot of increase, I would say, in the marijuana use and vaping. A lot of education needed for families and not just families, but teachers and adults, that those issues are concerning, and a lot of, I'll just say, parents or adults don't think that those are issues or concerns. Oh, I know you said the talking from, I'm thinking of another one that's popping up. Definitely the underage drinking, that is a concern. There's not a stigma, but just a kind of lighthearted in some of in the region, in Region 1, that, oh, if the youth are drinking, well, if they're doing it at home, it's okay, or if they're supervised, it's okay. And so a lot of education and awareness on those challenges is definitely needed in those other topics.
Any further questions? Any questions for any other presenters from the team? All right, well, thank you very much. And finally, as I think the Commission's aware, our statutory responsibility is to hear reports regarding our local coordinating council from the Criminal Justice Institute. So, Devin? Thank you. Is it up there? Or...
I don't know why they don't make all these things the same. Did that with motorcycles back in the 70s. I don't know why they can't. All right, so here we go. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So I'm going to be kind of brief. I'm not going to read everything to you, but yes, I am here to provide a little bit of an update on what's happening with the LCCs around the state. So CJI conducted I'll say a brief survey. Earlier this year, it was disseminated around 82 of the LCCs. About 49 of them responded, which is about 51% response rate, which for a survey is fantastic. A lot of good information came out of that. As you can see there on your slide, the kind of percent breakdown from each of the regions. We have 6 regions around the state. They're kind of divided vertically, roughly in the middle of the state. To the north, basically above State Road 26, to the south, basically below State Road 44, you know where those are. That kind of breaks up the regions there. So if you see there on the far right of the slide, the different percentages there. So those are the kind of areas of focus that the LCCs have said that they want to work on throughout 2021. So recruiting new board members, increase the capacity of their board of directors, and their initiatives around awareness around the work that the LCCs are doing locally. The next slide here, as you can see, there's a couple other things that came out of this. One of them, again, on the far right, the service alignment. Basically, the LCCs are reporting that they're doing what they're statutorily required to do, which is great, what we're asking them to do. Some of the things that you'll see on this slide, as well as the next couple slides that you'll see, is that COVID-19 had an impact on the LCCs as well. One of the major impacts, or one of the ways that the LCCs, the primary way that the LCCs get their funding is through fines and fees through criminal conviction. Obviously, as COVID-19 we went through lockdown and the pandemic, there were no court cases, there were no convictions, so there were no fees that were assessed or gathered through that process. So it's one of the things I'd like to highlight here. Differences there in that circle on the top left that you'll see. About 40% annotated a decrease in the amount of funding that they received throughout 2020 and moving into 2021. The next slide here. So this is kind of on the far right. You'll see it's a template of the cover sheet of our comprehensive community plan. Where we sit today, 86 counties submitted. We have a due date of April 1st for the local, the LCCs to submit their comprehensive community plans. For those of you that don't know, the comprehensive community plan, or CCP, is what the LCC derives as their plan, their action plan for that year. What are the issues within their county that they want to tackle around substance abuse
use, mental health, it could be underage drinking, tobacco use. I know vaping or use of marijuana are really on the rise in a couple different areas as well. And so of the 86 counties that submitted theirs, 84 were approved and 2 of them are still waiting modifications. I'm gonna kind of move through some of these a little out of order. As I mentioned previously, the funding that was received from 2020 to 2021 is kind of small, but you'll see across the different areas, they all decreased. So the amount of fees deposited across the state over the last year decreased about 15%. So that obviously has a range of impacts on the work that the LCCs do, the amount of funding that they have to distribute across the community to help those programs. Obviously won't be as much as it has been previously. This is another chart that kind of outlines the same thing as it probably wouldn't be a surprise. Marion County kind of has the most money in the state. It's obviously the largest county in the state, has the most population, down to a very low, about $8,000 that an LCC had to use for this coming year. So as you can see, $8,000 doesn't get you a whole lot when it comes to programming or other efforts related to substance abuse or mental health. You can see there the regional total, funding totals, averages across everywhere. You can see the Region 2 and Region 4 kind of have the highest amounts of the regions that incorporate like Lake County, Marion County as well. So that's why those totals are where they are. Your next slide is your funding segmentation. There's a couple things I'd like to point out here, and again, I'm going to be kind of brief. You can kind of see the breakdown in the pie chart, and then on the right, the number of LCCs, the percentage of the total that we have, and the total amount of funding that they receive. So you'll see about 21 counties have $25,000 or less to do something with. 33, on down the line. The top 4 counties, I would like to highlight those. There has the $200,000 plus. That's a significant amount of money. Marion County obviously falls within that. But the top 4, Elkhart, Marion, Hamilton, and Knox County. Unfortunately, Knox County will actually fall off of that list through the course of Michael and his folks. We actually found a couple counties where their funds weren't being deposited correctly. And so once we found that out, there was this big, obviously, upward tick in funding for this year. Now those funds will carry over for a little while, but eventually they will fall off. Lake County and Tippecanoe County are also pretty high. They're 2 of the counties there in the $100,000 to $200,000 region. But I would like to highlight a few of our higher functioning LCCs that we have around the state. Hamilton County is one. Let me get my list here. They do a really good job. From Joella's district, Porter County is one of our higher performing LCCs as well as Lake County. And then in the south, we have Scott County, and then back up to Tippecanoe County is actually one of our higher performing LCCs as well. So I would like to highlight the work that they're doing and say good job to them for their efforts. One of the other things that I would like to add, it's not LCC related, but it does kind of relate to the work that we're doing here, and something that Joella mentioned is stigma related to substance abuse. I was recently in Washington, D.C. for a drug impaired driving conference. At CGI, one of the things that we do is traffic safety. The way things are trending, and currently the national statistics is that the number of individuals that are arrested and test positive for THC impairment is outpacing those for alcohol. So the use of THC while driving is considered okay. That's a national trend. It's not just in Indiana. That's everywhere. Some of the other trends that we're seeing are with the polysubstance use that's been mentioned quite a bit as well, is that sometimes folks will take a stimulant, a methamphetamine, say, for instance, and they're like, well, I got to drive, I got to go to work, so I can't drive all hopped up on the stimulant, so then they'll smoke marijuana to bring themselves down, and so so then, you know, they'll try to drive the car then, and obviously that doesn't work as well either. So, you know, those are things that, maybe we'll highlight as we progress, maybe further, briefs from me, but, just some things I'd like to draw attention to that hopefully the LCCs will work on, and we can continue to work on that information. Thank you.
Thanks. Communities that don't complete the plan, they don't spend the dollars.
Correct. So, if a community does not submit their comprehensive community plan, CJI has the authority to freeze their funds at the local level. If they submit one that's inadequate, we can do the same thing. We don't like to do that. That's kind of meddling in local issues, and that's not something that we take lightly, but we do it occasionally. But again, yeah, it's not something that we like to do.
One other question? Yeah, Devin, one thing I might suggest, just watching your presentation, I think the LCCs would be an excellent group to try to communicate to them that if they're in a litigating county, to contact their county commissioners to urge them to opt into the settlement agreement. When we were meeting with AIC, the Association of Indiana Counties, early on before the attorneys got involved, we talked specifically about trying to get some of this money to the LCCs. You know, the abatement funds, when the subdivisions come together as a region to decide how they want to spend their share of the abatement funds, one of the things they could do is just decide, you know, each LCC in every county in their region gets some of those funds. And that could be part of their regional plan that they all agree on. So we talked to David about that being potentially a source of income that these LCCs could get, because a lot, as you mentioned, a lot of them are underfunded. So just, they need to be thinking that they could potentially draw money out of the settlement if they're on a regional basis. That was something they decided to do. So I would encourage, if you can get an email to them, to let them know to talk to their mayors and county commissioners in these in the litigating counties, to encourage them to join in and let them know that potentially that could be a source of funding for their organization. I think that'd be helpful.
Sure, yeah, we can absolutely do that. I know Michael and his folks, they have monthly and quarterly calls to the LCCs. They're also going to be convening kind of an advisory group later this year, kind of the higher functioning coordinators. I think that's supposed to take place next month. So that's certainly something that we can bring up. And obviously September will be a little bit past when I think some of those dates were for the opt-in, opt-out, but we can certainly speak to them in the meantime. That's not a problem. You highlight a good point. I briefly went through the slide selection, but when the LCCs spend their dollars they do have, it aligns perfectly with the settlement options of prevention, treatment, and criminal justice related activities for that forensic population as well.
Thank you. Devin, thanks for the presentation. You had a slide that showed, you know, the Indiana map with accessibility for substance abuse treatment. Is there any additional context on that? It looks like,
yeah, there's another document in your packet there that kind of expands on what was in the survey. I didn't want to just read the document to you because it's in there, but it's definitely in that, and we can certainly, if you want more, after you have a chance to take a look at it, if you need more information, please let me know. I'm happy to get it.
but the LLCs, are they reporting that there is not good access in these counties that are in the white?
Some of the, yes. So the accessibility to a lot of these programs is an issue, and I know we've talked about, I mean, it's been discussed for at least the last year and a half, is the accessibility for folks who actually work in the treatment field, capacity, how many beds are available. I know BMHA, the open beds, and everybody's been working on that. So yeah, I mean, accessibility to treatment is an issue that a lot of folks are discussing and highlighting.
Yeah, and Chris, I'll point out that the white one did not report.
That's non-reported, okay.
Not reported, and these are also the opinion of those people at the LCC. You know, FSA has increased residential treatment beds by 213% since 2017. So I know that there's been a lot of effort to not just ensure that we're creating that treatment infrastructure, that we're making those connections, and also through the courts. I know they've been big proponents of adding more problem-solving courts, but unfortunately, oftentimes we find we have more money to fund those courts, than we have willing applicants to take those problem-solving, courts on, so.
That totally clarified it, the white meat out reporting, I thought that was for emphasis, thank you.
Any other questions? All right, thank you. Thank you to everyone, for your time and attention today, and thank you to our presenters. As a reminder, our next meeting is Thursday, November 4th at 10 a.m. We'll be in the State Library next time, and we'll be sending more details as we get closer to the meeting. So thank you for joining us. We stand adjourned.